Okay, we want to welcome you all back in to be seated as we're going to start with our next presentation. And just before we start, I do want to let you know that there will be handouts. I believe we'll be giving them out at the end. And we will also be having a questions and answer session in our very last session. And you'll have opportunity to ask your questions. I'm going to get some paper and pencils out to everybody. And what I'd like you to do is, as the presentations are going on, write down whatever questions you would like to ask. And we're going to collect them, and we will present the questions to our panel, and they will give you answers. Okay? So without further ado, I turn the floor over to Olaf.
Okay, thank you. Well, it is wonderful to be here with all of you fine folk. And today, this presentation, we're going to be looking at how to stay healthy amid a collapsing medical system. The past couple of years have really given evidence that there is such a thing as a collapsing medical system. As a nation, we're dealing with coronavirus, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And what was happening is the coronavirus, it became a worldwide situation, and it became so focused. The news, the internet, this was just two and a half years ago. Remember those times, how intense they were? And throughout all that intensity, as people were dealing with COVID and people were getting sick, they were going to the hospitals and people were dying, there was one lone voice, Dr. Peter McCullough. Many of you may be acquainted with who he is. He's become quite known in the last 2.5 years. But on a professional level, he's among the top 5 scientists that have published articles in relationship to health and medical studies in the journals and so forth. And this one lone voice was troubled by what he saw was happening as we as a nation were dealing with coronavirus. He says, what is being given to us by the CDC and the government is for us doctors not to provide any preventive care. And what is being stated is the information that we're instructed by is that the patient is to remain at home until such time the patient is too sick, and then they are to go to the hospital. And you may recall the conversations that were happening back then. And Dr. Peter McCullough was just so adamant. He was so burdened. He says, why aren't we doing something? And you may remember how President Trump, he said he is taking hydroxychloroquine. Remember that news thing? And the media, as the media does, they were very skeptical about President Trump. They were skeptical about hydroxychloroquine. But President Trump, he spoke of it with confidence and definiteness. And here is Fox News' Neil Cavuto is stunned by Trump's announcement that he is taking hydroxychloroquine. If you are in a risky population here and you are taking this as a preventive treatment, it will kill you. I cannot stress enough, this will kill you. And so that was coming toward us by news agencies throughout America, that hydroxychloroquine, even though President Trump says, hey, this thing will cure COVID, we were being hammered with other perspectives that no, hydroxychloroquine, it's going to kill you. And President Trump, of course, he came back. He said the highly respected Henry Ford Health System just reported, based on a large sampling, that hydroxychloroquine cut the death rate in certain sick patients very significantly. And he went on to say, the Dems disparage it for political reasons. Me, disgraceful act now. And that's what he tweeted. What well, who was right? What was going on? And as we were looking to the medical system to deliver us from this pandemic, interestingly, during that time, a group called America's Frontline Doctors. Have you heard of America's Frontline Doctors? They became quite known, and they were an obscure group. I had never heard of them until they appeared here on this newscast, and they were espousing that COVID-19 is not as serious a threat as it is being made out to be. And in fact, there was one doctor, Dr. Stella Emanuel. Those of you who saw that broadcast, how she just stood out and she said, hydroxychloroquine, it cures COVID. And she was so adamant. And it was like, wow, yeah, President Trump said that. Now this doctor is stepping forward and saying that. And she was a doctor out of Texas. And she said she was treating her patients with hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and exercise. And people were getting well. In fact, not one of her patients died, she was claiming. And of course, if we do the backstory and read up on her, what she was saying was actually true, everything she was saying. And so there was a group of doctors who were exclaiming, this is something that will help. We don't have to be concerned about this COVID. There is a cure. And yet, the general establishment was opposing them for saying that. This is Dr. Suet of MedCram fame. He is a YouTuber. And I was very intrigued because I was listening to his presentations, his coronavirus epidemic update. And on update 34, he addressed hydroxychloroquine and how it works. And he said, well, hydroxychloroquine is a drug that opens the cells of the body and allows zinc to come in to that cell. And so if your cell is invaded by the COVID-19 virus, hydroxychloroquine comes along, opens up that cell, zinc comes in, and zinc completely causes that virus to have an inability to replicate, and it puts a stop to that the spreading of the disease. And so that was very interesting as I listened to him explaining why hydroxychloroquine actually worked. Interestingly, it wasn't shortly thereafter that his YouTube channel got canceled. And that was the narrative that was happening. That was what was happening. If you weren't fitting into the narrative, into the story that was wanting to be promoted by the media, you may be a professional doctor, you may be very learned, but you were getting canceled. And but after much discussion, he was able to get his channel back with YouTube. Well, things weren't going well for the narrative that hydroxychloroquine is a bad thing and you shouldn't take it. And so what we find happening next, a prestigious medical journal called The Lancet published a report. And in the report, it basically said that a study was conducted and hydroxychloroquine was utilized and it was killing people. And this was an astonishing report. And so what ended up happening, there were other studies that were being done at that time in different hospitals regarding the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine, and those studies immediately came to a grounding halt. It was stopped, and hydroxychloroquine was pronounced as a dangerous drug, not to be utilized. Interestingly, though, 2 weeks later, after much complaint by the professional scientists that the study was not conducted right, it was a fake study, if we may use that word. It was not a true study, that the Lancet retracts that paper, but the damage had been done. And hydroxychloroquine had basically, the poisoning of the well had taken place. And hydroxychloroquine was no longer considered as something reliable to be considered. And the CDC, to my knowledge, never stepped back from forbidding doctors to prescribe hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19. So here was Dr. Peter McCullough, and he says early COVID-19 treatment sacrificed to promote vaccine. And that there was an agenda, according to this prestigious doctor, that was taking place in our country to prevent people from getting well so that there would be a hunger and a desperation for the vaccine, was what he testified in Congress in that manner. Dr. Peter McCullough breaks down in tears at the tragedy that is happening with doctors following the government's orders to not give early treatment to patients when early treatment has proven effective. 85% of COVID deaths could have been prevented, Dr. Peter McCullough told the podcast. If they had at least 85% of them had early treatment, they would have survived. And this is a doctor who is not trying to get fame or claim, but a doctor who is moved to tears as he considers the number of loved ones, sons, daughters, elderly parents who passed away because early treatment was being forbidden by the government. So what basically happened was our medical system that we looked to was collapsing, wasn't it? And in many ways we can say that the medical system, because it was influenced by governmental mandates, it prevented early treatment. And we trusted the medical system, and the medical system let us down. And then we can say, well, it was the government that let us down. Yeah, but the medical system, there were very few doctors who took a step forward and say, I'll put my license on the line, I'll put my career on the line, but I'm going to help heal people. Very few doctors did that. And so the question comes back to us, what do we do in the midst of a collapsing medical system? We're so accustomed, I get sick, let me run to the doctor. And a lot of us as Americans, we have checked into the lame duck motel, which basically is because of our ignorance. We don't understand how to get healthy, how to stay healthy, and as a result, we put our trust upon a situation that puts us at a disadvantage. Because of ignorance, ignorance leads to fear. You know, if you get COVID, you're going to die, and we're all going to die. And that leads to panic, and panic leads to manipulation, to the point where if you don't do what we say, we're all going to die as a nation from this plague. And that is pretty sad. And could we say that was a pretty much an accurate description of what we experienced in the last 2.5 years? Yeah. Well, if we can get rid of ignorance and instead have knowledge, knowledge will get rid of the fear and give us boldness. Just like the America's frontline doctors, they boldly stood in front of the Capitol and they said, there is a cure. And how could they be so bold in the midst of society being so fearful? They were bold because they had knowledge and they had experience. And when we have boldness, we get rid of the panic and we have peace. We know the narrative is wrong. That's not true. And we can have peace and thereby not be manipulated. Instead, we can have choice. And so that's what this presentation is all about, is to get rid of the ignorance, to give us knowledge so that we can have boldness, which will give us peace. And you can know that you do have choice when pandemics come up. COVID-19 isn't the last that we're going to face. Did you hear what I said? It's not the last that we're going to say. How do I know that? The Simpsons told me. Bill Gates. There's going to be another one. There's so many different voices that are coming our way that are trying to psychologically mess with our minds and be accepting. And what I want to tell you today is that we're going to look at some things that, regardless of what comes, you have within your body the very thing that is all you need to overcome any pandemic that comes along. And I think that by the end of our presentation, you'll understand why I say that so boldly to you. Milton Tesk, medical doctor, he said, if you get influenza, that's the flu, your likelihood of not dying is 99.87%. How many of you had the flu this past year or whatever? Yeah. You survived, didn't you? It was miserable, the blowing the nose, the fever, being stuck in bed. It was the flu. Well, 99.87% of people who get the flu will not die. He went on to say, if you get COVID-19, your likelihood of not dying is 99.74%. So COVID is a little bit more dangerous, isn't it? Out of 385 persons who get COVID-19, one person will not fare well, typically due to a compromised immune system. But what if we took all 385 people who got COVID and made sure that they did not have a compromised immune system? I think we can do that. Now suddenly, we're all going to fare well, 100%. Your amazing immune system. Well, first off, 3 lines of defense. There's external, and then what we call non-specific innate immunity, specific acquired immunity. And I'll explain what all that means. But first off, let's look at external. Did you know on your skin you secrete a substance that is antibacterial? And you thought, or at least were convinced by advertisements, that the only way we can have antibacterial is if we use antibacterial soap or these antibacterial creams. Well, your body automatically secretes a oily substance on your skin that kills bacteria. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Already right from the start. Well, what about COVID-19? They convinced us that it floats through the air mysteriously, and you could be walking by, and suddenly that COVID-19 goes through your nostrils. And mind you, let me tell you this, COVID-19 virus is a whole lot smaller than the huge holes that are in your mask. The mask doesn't prevent COVID-19 going up your nose. But you know what does prevent COVID-19? It's incredible the way God has designed us in our sinus cavities. God has designed a mechanism that creates nitric oxide. And this is the latest research in the last 10 years. They've discovered that your sinuses create nitric oxide, and so when you breathe through your nose, the air goes through an environment of nitric oxide. And the researchers, they took the coronavirus, they put it in the lab to find out how much nitric oxide would be required to destroy the coronavirus, and they discovered that the nitric oxide in our sinuses is a whole lot more than what is needed to destroy the coronavirus. I don't know about you, but when I read that, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And if you want to do the research yourself, just go on YouTube. Look up, put in nitric oxide breathing through the nose. And incredible stuff is there. So right from the start, breathing through your nose. If we all breathe through our nose, you go through a crowded airport and people are sneezing and coughing, you want to breathe through your nose. But you want to properly breathe through your nose, not in rapid successions and very shallow, but slowly. Why? Because slowly the air is going through the nose and it's mixing itself with nitric oxide, and that air is being purified. You don't have to spend $5,000 on an air purifier. You got one in your nose. Just use it. Breathe through it. And then, of course, in the back of your throat, you have your tonsils, and the tonsils, some of us have our tonsils removed. I'm very sorry for you. But those of you who don't have your tonsils removed, your tonsils are like a magnet. So as the food and saliva goes down your throat, those tonsils are like a magnet, and they attract bacteria and viruses. And in the tonsils are incredible armies of the body that are looking for those viruses and those bacteria, and they destroy them. Have you ever had your tonsils swollen? Well, that's because your body is fighting something that's in your environment. Nothing wrong with your tonsils. They're working. And there are ways that you can assist your body, assist your tonsils if you have a major sore throat or what have you. And we can talk about that at a later time. So we breathe through the nose. Nitric oxide is right there defending us. If we're eating something, the tonsils are there helping us as well. And here is the scientific. Somebody always wants to say, well, where did you find that? Well, here's a medical journal. The role of nitric oxide in the sinuses is likely to enhance local host defense mechanisms via direct inhibition of pathogen growth and stimulation of mucociliary activity. Don't you love these scientists? They're always throwing at us huge words, so we hardly can understand what they're saying. But what it's saying is, notice the next sentence, the nitric oxide concentration in a healthy sinus exceeds those that are needed for antibacterial effects in vitro. So breathing through the nose is more than capable than to handle any bacteria or virus that is floating through and you breathe it in. The publication, the one that just came up, is Journal of Virology. And this is the one that specifically where they did a study on coronavirus. And, well, let's move on. Non-specific innate immunity. We've looked at the external just briefly, not exhaustively, but we've seen that the way our bodies are designed externally, we're already in a good position. Non-specific innate immunity. That word non-specific, what does that mean? Well, it means it's not specific. Well, innate means that it's automatic in your body, and immunity means it's fighting disease. So this immunity, you have two types of immune cells, non-specific innate and specific acquired. And we'll be looking at both of these. Non-specific innate immunity, I want you to imagine it's your local police department, and they're in town here in Newport or Diamond Lake, and they're driving up and down the streets. They're not looking for anybody specifically. They're just wanting to make sure everything is fine. And the moment they see trouble, they're on it. That's what non-specific immunity is. You have cells going through your body, through your circulation. They're not looking for anything specific. They just want to make sure that everything is fine. And we call them scavenger cells. Have you been on a scavenger hunt where you have your list and you got to go? You're looking just all over the place and everywhere. Well, that's what these cells are doing. They're going all over the place. They are looking for bad guys, but not specifically. They're just looking as the circulation is going through your body. And there's two types, the granulocytes and the monocytes. Granular, they are granular in appearance. When you look under the microscope, they're granular in appearance, and there's three types: the neutrophils, the eosinophils, and the basophils. The neutrophils, when you have blood work being done, that's what your doctor is looking at specifically. Because why? Because they make more than half of your white blood cells in your body, the neutrophils. And they're the ones who are going around, they're the city police just driving around throughout your body looking to see if there's any issues. The eosinophils, they are specifically looking for multi-celled pathogens, like worms. I had a friend of mine who was really into eating pork, And too much so that he got, what do you call it, the trichina worms that we find in pork. And one day he was having some type of thing in his backyard with his family, and he had friends over. They were having a good time, and he's I think at the barbecue or whatever, and suddenly he collapses, completely destroys the fun family activity that was happening. They rush him to the hospital to find out what's wrong with Dad, what's wrong with Dad. And come to find out after doing some testing and MRIs, there was a little worm in the center of his brain that they can't get to, but it stuck there, and it had moved. Every time it moved, it would cause a collapse. He lost his driver's license, he lost his ability, he lost basically his life. But the eosinophils are specializing in trying to get rid of that. And so the big thing for him was to begin to boost his immune system so that somehow, hopefully, that multi-celled organism would be destroyed by the body's immune system. So that's what the eosinophils do. Isn't it incredible how our designer, the designer of our bodies, has thought of all these things, and they have specific functions? The basophils, have you ever suddenly gotten a runny nose? That's your basophils in action. The basophils, they go and they open the cell doors. They're opening up. Why are they opening things up? Because there is a danger, there's a pathogen, there's a germ that needs to be taken care of. And so the basophils, their role is to open up so that all the other white blood cells can quickly come in, and we call that inflammation. Have you ever, your head hurts because you have a sinus infection? Well, those basophils are actively opening things up so that that infection can be taken care of by the neutrophils. And the neutrophils, the way they destroy and kill the germs, they give off a chemical secretion, and they chemically destroy the germ, the virus, or the bacteria. So that's the granulocytes, and they're the city police just going throughout your body, looking, non-specific, they're looking. And then we come to the monocytes. Mono is just another word for what? One. Cytes, cell, one-celled white blood cell. And the biggest white blood cell you have in your body is the macrophage. Have you heard of that word, macrophages? And these are the big guys, and they come in, and the neutrophils, they find the germ, the basophils, they open the door, and the macrophage come riding in, and they destroy that germ. They just engulf them. They're the cavalry, you could say, yes. And if a neutrophil finds a cancer cell in your body, they'll call in the macrophages, and that macrophage will just engulf that cancer cell and destroy it. Did you know you can overcome cancer? You can. Boost your immune system. Your body has what it takes to overcome these diseases that often are told us are death certificates. Don't give up hope. You are designed to overcome disease, not to succumb to disease. So the macrophages are the big ones. They come in, and the dendrites, we call them APC. Those are antigen. Antigen is just another word for germs. Antigen presenting cell. So the dendrites, they present to the other white blood cells that this is a germ. And this is particularly important when we look at the acquired immune system, which we're going to look at next. So the dendrites, they discover the germ. The neutrophils are over there. The basophils are opening the doors. The dendrites come in. The macrophages are engulfing. And the dendrites begin to jot down exactly what that germ looks like. He's got a scar above his left eye. He's got a tattoo on his right arm. And he walks like this, And that's what the dendrites do. They are very specific in taking down exactly what that germ looks like. Why is that important? Because they're going to give the information to the acquired immune system. And before we get to that, let's look at good circulation. Why is good circulation important? Have you ever been in trouble and you call the city police and the city police says, hey, I'd like to get to your house, but the 101, it's jam-packed. There's no way I can get there. It's clogged. There's not good circulation on the highways. Now, up here in North Idaho, we love the highways because there's no clogging, is there? Or in Washington, no clogging, generally. Except there are sometimes when we go to the big cities, sometimes perhaps. But if you travel down to California, Southern California in particular, it is just absolutely horrible. Certain times of day, make sure you bring a book along. You can read a book while you're sitting there in traffic. You're not going anywhere. Good circulation is important for these emergency personnel of your body to come to the aid to fight disease. So how do we have good circulation? Number one, drink lots of water. Why is water important? When you are dehydrated, the red blood cells, they cling together, and they're all together. And when they're all together, it's like a one-lane highway that is trying to get 4 cars down that highway, and everyone's having a difficulty getting, and it's clogging. And if you're dehydrated, your blood pressure is going to go up. That's why if you are someone who has high blood pressure, start drinking more water. It could be that you're on a lifestyle of dehydration. Start drinking more water, and you're going to find improvement in your blood pressure because the circulation is going to be there. Blood thrives on drinking lots of water. Low fat, low sugar diet, eat whole foods. So instead of the snack foods that are refined foods, we want to eat whole foods. Why is that important? Why not eat a high-fat diet? Well, high fat does the same thing. It causes the blood cells to cling together, and it makes it sluggish in your... Have you ever had a very high-fat meal, and after the meal you feel like, what? Laying down. I think it's a time for a nap, Well, not really, but that's how you're feeling. The fat is very clogging, and you feel sleepy. There's the oxygen that your body was formerly really giving to your brain. It's not giving it as readily because of a high-fat meal. High fat it takes about 6 hours to clear that up in your body. If high fat is part of your lifestyle, then just about the time that your body cleared that high-fat meal out of your blood system and you then eat another high-fat meal, can you see how it can become chronic? Not a good thing. So we don't want to eat high-fat. Instead, start eating whole foods that are not refined, low-sugar diet. Another important aspect. Why is sugar a problem? Sugar does the same thing. It causes the blood to cling together. Problem with sugar, it's even more toxic than fat. And I use the word toxic loosely, if I may. But it's because it takes 3 months for that to clear up in your bloodstream, according to the latest research that I've read. So 6 hours for high fat and for high sugar, 3 months. And so we're walking around with very poor circulation because we eat high fat, high sugar, the blood is sticky together, and then on top of that, we're not drinking enough water. Those white blood cells, the city police, are not making it through your body. So we don't want to keep going in that direction expecting different results. That's what is that? The definition of what? Insanity. Change your lifestyle, and you're going to find that your immunity is going to be boosted. Undereat. When we overeat, that can be problematic to your circulation. Cheerful thoughts. Incredible study. They did a study. Can you imagine somebody's doing a study on cheerful thoughts? Well, they did. And they found that people who are cheerful, who get up in the morning looking to see that the sun is still shining above the clouds, and that the glass is half full, and just having a cheerfulness and a thankfulness in their life actually improves their circulation and thereby improves their immunity. Proper breathing of fresh air, we've talked about that, but oxygen helps that circulation. And that was one thing I forgot to mention. The nitric oxide, when you breathe properly through your nose, not only does it kill the pathogens in the air, but when it goes down into the lungs, the nitric oxide actually is a vasodilating effect. Vasodilating meaning it causes the blood vessels to expand and enlarge. And so you can actually absorb oxygen much more effectively simply by breathing properly. So proper breathing of fresh air helps the circulation. Dress appropriately, especially in wintertime. If you're not dressed properly, what are your muscles doing? Oh man, it's so cold out there. And we just, contract our muscles, and your whole body is doing that. Your blood vessels have muscles, and it's all contracting. And so what is that doing to your circulation? And so we want to be dressed properly. You go outside, make sure you have your jacket on. Make sure that you have something on your head, especially in these really freezing temperatures that we've been having lately. And then, of course, the most obvious how to have good circulation is exercise, movement. And movement can be, if you're not accustomed to moving, and I know we laugh about that, but that's a reality, isn't it? We have become accustomed to not moving. And if you're not accustomed to moving, even a little bit every day is an improvement over not doing anything. And there's different forms of exercise. And again, this is something for another time that we can discuss. But those factors are very important. Now, we talked about the circulatory system on the left-hand side. That's the circulatory, that's the blood vessels that your heart is pumping, and it's pumping that blood into the blood vessels. And when it comes back, the veins are bringing the blood back to the lungs to get oxygenated again. And so that's what we call the circulatory system, and the blood movement is constantly being moved by the heart pumping. Now, we also have another system in our body which is almost identical in terms of highway structure and streets, and that is our lymphatic system. In the lymphatic system, you have a network of vessels all throughout your body, but the lymphatic system does not have the heart pumping the lymphatic fluid through that network of system in your body. How does it move then? The lymphatic system only moves by exercise. Now, I didn't hear anybody say, wow. That is a wow. Because what that tells you is if you're not moving, if you're not exercising, you're defeating pretty much 60-70% of your immune system. Because in the lymphatic system is your more powerful immune system. And we're going to look at that. And that's the specific acquired immunity. And we're going to be looking at T cells and B cells. You may have heard of what T cells and B cells are. Those are lymphocytes. Those are the white blood cells. Those are the immunity in your lymphatic system. And the only way they can get around is by what? Exercise. By movement. I'm walking around here on this stage. You guys are sitting. My lymph is moving. T cells. Let's look at specific acquired immunity. Specific meaning what? They're looking for somebody specific. With the non-specific innate immunity that we just talked about the city police who just is driving around looking just to make sure no trouble is around. Well, with these guys, these are specific. They are looking specifically for somebody. And guess who gave them the information? The dendrites that we talked about. The dendrites, they took down the information and they gave it to the lymphocytes, to the T cells, the helper T cells. And the natural killer T cells are kind of like your snipers of the body's immune system. They're very good, they're very accurate, they're very powerful. And the dendrite cells, they give it to the information to the helper T cells. The helper T cells give the information to the killer T cells. And so now the killer T cells, they're looking, and they got their scope, and they're looking for the guy with the cut above his eye and the tattoo on his arm. And they look, and they see him, bam! And they are so powerful, that germ has no chance. COVID-19 has no chance when the killer T cells get into action. And that's all because of the lymphatic system. And again, exercise is so important. This one doctor that we had talked about earlier who was promoting hydroxychloroquine because it opens up the cells for zinc to come in to destroy and incapacitate the virus. That one doctor, part of her treatment was putting people into an exercise program. And in fact, I look out and I see some friends of mine who had COVID, and the way they got over COVID, guess what they were doing? In the midst of when they could hardly breathe, they were wiped out, they forced themselves outside, and guess what they were doing? They were exercising, and they overcame the COVID. Exercise is so important because it activates the lymphocytes. So the T cells, the natural killer T cells, they're very specific, and they isolate the antigen, the germ, and they take them out. They are incredible. They are very good. What about the regulator T cells? Well, if you have somebody who's so good at killing and loves to kill, the natural killer T cells. That almost sounded like my phone. I was about to go for it. But the natural killer T cells, they're so good at killing that they don't want to stop killing. And we call that, what do we call that when the body starts attacking itself? Autoimmune system, exactly. And that's what's happening is the killer T cells, they keep killing. And they start attacking your own body. And that's where the regulator T cells come into play. The regulator T cells, they assess the situation. Hey, COVID's done. Hey, stop the killing. No more killing. And they'll come alongside these killer T cells. And if the killer T cells do not stop, guess what the regulator T cells do? It kills them. Exactly. They kill the killer T cells. And that's your body's way of shutting off the immune system when it is overactive. And people who have lupus, who deal with these autoimmune diseases, are dealing with a malfunction of the regulator T cells not doing their job. So how do we correct that? We correct it by enhancing the immune system, the body's immune system. B cells, and that's discussion for another day. B cells. What do the B cells do? Well, the activated B cells, have you heard of antibodies? Antibodies are, this is the mainstay of the activated B cells. And when they are told by the dendritic cells the information regarding the scar above the eye, the tattoos and so forth, they will send out antibodies. And antibodies, from my perspective, they're like handcuffs. And they just go into the bloodstream, and these handcuffs are so amazing. I mean, I think our local police department wishes they had antibodies, because let me tell you what these antibodies do. These antibodies, these handcuffs, go into the bloodstream, and wherever this germ that has the identifying marks, it attaches itself to the germ, and suddenly that germ becomes handcuffed and cannot do anything. It becomes immobilized. And so now they're floating through your body immobilized because this antibody has attached itself, and the killer T cells, of course, they're and then boom, they're like, shooting immobilized, well, some of us may not be hunters here. But so the B cells are throwing out these handcuffs, these antibodies. That's their role, the activated B cells. Memory B cells. What are the memory B cells? And some of you might be familiar with that. If you have come down with a particular strain of the flu this year. And 6 months from now, that flu virus is floating through the air and it's making its way through the community again, and it comes to you, the memory B cells will remember that germ, and it will immediately activate the T cells. It will immediately activate the rest of the immune system, so that that virus that comes through, whether through your food, through your mouth, or a cut in your skin, whatever way it got into your body, because of the memory B cells, your body already knows that this is a germ, and it will take it out. And that germ doesn't even have a chance. Well, let's look at the journey, the life and death of an antigen. So we have a germ, a scary-looking germ, and let's say we're breathing, but we're breathing properly, so it goes through the nose, and that scary-looking germ is suddenly in a toxic environment of nitric oxide, and it is trying to fight against it, and it dies. But let's say it somehow escapes the nitric oxide and lodges itself in your sinuses, and you get a sinus infection. Well, what ends up happening is, first off, the neutrophils, they've been roaming around. They're up there in your sinuses. 50% of your white blood cells are neutrophils, and they discover this virus, and so they're attacking it. And the basophils suddenly come in, and they open up, and suddenly you start getting a runny nose because the doors are being opened, and there's fluid flowing, and the macrophages come in. But let's say it's still so powerful, and it's maybe you breathe through your mouth, or for whatever reason, it's attacking your body, and you get a fever. The basophils are actually involved in raising your body temperature. In fact, there was a time many years ago when pediatricians were so alarmed if your child had a fever, and they said, "Come, bring that child in. We got to reduce that fever." Today, they don't say that anymore. Research they have found fever exerts an overall adverse effect on the growth of bacteria and on the replication of viruses. And what they found is, as the body temperature raises and you get a temperature 102, 103, 104, that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Why? Because the germ that is replicating itself, it's doubling itself, and that's how the disease spreads in your body. It just replicates itself, and in a matter of seconds it's quadrupled and so forth. Well, when the body temperature is raised to a high level, those germs don't have ability to replicate themselves, so they're just, here they are, and they're trying to replicate, but it's too hot. The fever is, the temperature is too high, and they can't replicate themselves, and your body in response is able to now manage and control the infection that is happening. And so pediatricians today say, no, germs, if your child has a germ infection and they get a fever, that's not a bad thing. You know, we want to watch and make sure it doesn't, jump to huge high spikes of fever, but generally fevers are not a bad thing. And so you have a fever, your body is attacking the germ, and because the basophils are opening up the doors, you have inflammation. Blood is pouring to that infection wherever it may be occurring, and you're not feeling good. You're feeling achy all over. You have a fever. You're feeling miserable. But all of what's happening is your immune system is opening those doors. The macrophages are coming in. The neutrophils are coming in. The eosinophils, the basophils, they're all doing their job. And then we have the dendrite cell, this red cell here. They come in. If the infection is still not being taken properly care of, the dendrites, they're jotting down exactly what the germ is, and they tell the T cells and the B cells. And the B cells, they throw out the handcuffs. The T cells, they're the snipers, and they start picking off the germ, and finally this last, the T regulator cells come into play because the infection has been taken care of, and they pull in the reins of your immune system just in time. The sun has come out, and you decide, I'm going to go outside and ride the bike. I'm feeling good now. Never realizing all along what has happened in your body to make you healthy. Isn't that amazing? Oh, the impact of sleep. Just want to emphasize that. You get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and it will make a huge difference. If you get less than 7 hours of sleep, your immune system is dropped by 300%. You want to have at least 7 hours of sleep. If you get less than that, or your sleep isn't good, you're waking up throughout the night, that can be problematic to your immune system. And so sleep is huge. In fact, I'm going to be sharing with you on my handout, there are 8 different things you can do, such as sleep, that are going to support your immune system and keep you healthy. Apnea, sleep apnea? We will have questions and answers, the moderator has told me. Good question. Let's hold on to that, and we'll look at that. So, sleep is important, and there are 8 different doctors, we can say, that if you follow the advice of Dr. Sleep, if you follow the advice of Dr. Exercise, these different doctors, you follow their advice, you will be supporting your immune system. And when the next pandemic comes around, regardless of what the media says, you know that your body can handle what's coming, because you've lined your life up with doing those things that are supportive to overcoming disease. And if you're fighting disease in the present, regardless of what disease, you can improve your health simply by lining your lifestyle up with those habits that support your immune system. Your body will heal itself. That's the way God has designed us. And even more importantly than that, in Psalm 103, verses 2 to 4, we read, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your sins, who heals all," what? "Your diseases." We have a God who loves you, who loves me so tenderly, so wonderfully, and he wants us to be healthy, and he's interested in healing us of all our diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies. Well, thank you for your kind attention, and that concludes our lecture.
Thank you, Olaf.